This will be a reply to the Veritas 48 video, called, Arguments Against the Existence of God. Let me begin by saying that what I will attempt in this response is to supply an argument that is not directly aimed at the existence or non-existence of God, but rather at the evidence of how God came to be as a concept in our culture. Thus, if I am successful in proving that God is a man-made invention, I would also prove that the thing we call God is make-believe, fiction, and thus cannot be taken as reality. On the other hand, I cannot and will not attempt to prove that a God cannot exist and does not exist, as this is folly. I can't prove that, just as much as I can't prove that orcs don't exist. It is up to Veritas 48 to judge if this is an acceptable form of arguing against the existence of God. For the reasons explained above, I see it as the only reasonable way to argue for or against this kind of claims. To analyze the claim, see what it is based on, and see if the claim can be considered reasonable to maintain as a plausible possibility. If you have watched my previous videos, you'll understand that, in my understanding, all one can prove is plausible possibility, no belief, no absolutes, only fractional, imperfect, changing models of reality. First of all, it is important to know that the concept of God as Veritas 48 describes it is a fairly new concept. I'm treating the concept in the same way as Veritas 48 presented it, a personal agent, responsible for creation, all-knowing, blah blah. You can listen to the full description he gave. I'm not debating his definition. The concept of God, as we have it today, first appeared around 4,000 to 6,000 years ago, with the advent of monotheism, first in Egypt, then in the Semitic religions. Prior to that, the concept of God, as a personal agent, all-knowing, benevolent, responsible for creation etc., did not exist. The various attributes of this unified God were mostly present, but spread out among various gods, each a personification of one of the attributes. One God would be benevolent towards farmers, another towards lovers, another towards warriors, and so on. This part most of you know, so I won't bore you by going too much into details. What fewer of you know is that this form of polytheistic religion is not the fundamental religion to predate monotheism. The so-called religion that came before that is dismissively called animism. If I were to ask you what this religion was all about, I'm pretty sure most of you would have trouble defining it and would need to do a quick wiki search to get up to speed. I'm not pointing this out to label you as ignorance or to boast about my enlightenment, but more to get you to ask yourselves one question. That question is, why is the religion that dominated our history, from the advent of our species, some 3 million years ago, the religion that was prevalent in our species for roughly 99% of our existence, being glazed over, in a hurry, packed together under an obscure term, and considered to be completely irrelevant? This religion, animism, wasn't even a single religion, but thousands, tens of thousands of religions, each specific to one group, each with its own stories, each with its own myths and gods, and logic. What ties them together into animism is a similar worldview. A particular way of seeing the world that is almost completely missing in our culture. What many of you also don't know is that in this religion, the concept or the characteristics of our modern God were completely absent. The gods of animism were not omnipotent, usually not solely responsible for creation, but creation was rather a common effort. They were not all-knowing, they were very much mortal. In fact, they were radically different from anything that followed in either polytheism or monotheism. In order to understand this difference, you need to understand the society in which these gods existed. Another difference is that these gods were not worshipped, not in the sense in which later gods were worshipped. They were rather a part of everyday lives, each present in a myriad of forms, and also opposed to later gods, thoroughly tangible and corporeal. They were the spirit of a tree, the spirit of a frog, the spirit of a forest, or of a field, the spirit of a wolf, the spirit of a land or a river. They were always there, never absent, never distant, never unreachable except by sacrifice, or by other offerings and pleas. These gods were not interested in giving guidelines to how men should live, how they should or should not act, and in general in how people should be. They did not hand out moral laws to be followed, nor did they seem to have much interest in humans in particular. They were just there, going about their business. Men, in turn, did not go out to worship, persuade or beg these gods to perform miracles for them, to bless their harvest, their crusade, their king, their land, but rather invited them to participate in their daily lives as guests, as friends, as neighbors. What I'm trying to show you here is that for the majority of human history, the concept of God or gods was radically different from how we understand it today. I'm trying to show you this, because I'm going to show you next how this modern God came to be, and changed, as the society and the culture changed. Approximately 10 to 12,000 years ago, a major shift occurred in one culture of the Middle East, a shift we now call civilization. This shift did not remain contained in that region but quickly spread, north of the Fertile Crescent, west into modern-day Turkey, where an empire later sprang up known as the Hittites, southeast into what later was known as the Egyptian Empire. In the region it sprang up as the Akkadian Empire, later known as Sumer or still later as Babylon. Then it spread even further west and the Mysian civilization sprang up, etc. You can follow the exact timeline by doing some searching on Wikipedia about Neolithic migration and civilizations. Why I'm pointing this out is that this cultural shift from hunter-gatherer societies to city-states and empires absolutely and completely coincided with a shift in religion from the prior animist religions into polytheistic religions. Society was no longer based around a tribe, but around a king, around a ruler, that then and later would be blessed into ruling by a priesthood that invoked the will of the gods to justify the divine right to rule of the king. If you read any texts of the era you will see this immediately. The king had a very personal relationship with the gods, was named into office by the gods so to say. In Egypt they were demigods or directly gods. The pharaoh got pyramids, because he was a god, and entitled to take his place amongst them after death. Burial practices changed dramatically under this new form of religion, so did rituals, and for the first time worship of the gods appeared. Gods weren't available to everybody anymore, they were distant and unavailable, except for sacrifices made to get their attention, and always mediated by a priesthood that suddenly became necessary to facilitate the relationship with the gods. In other words, priests had direct access to gods, ordinary people did not. Which leads us to another peculiarity of this new culture, which is hierarchy. Suddenly people rule over people, different people have different rights, different access, different classes. And gods hover above them all, giving arbitrary blessings to some, while not to others, giving edicts on how people should live, etc. If you study any of these infant civilization, you will see that the purpose of the gods is primarily to justify and watch over the social structure. The hierarchy in human society is mirrored by the hierarchy of the gods. You won't find any hierarchy among animist gods. Another coincidence, as society became political, so did gods. In fact, they were brought into the scene especially to justify political decisions, to justify why X individual is entitled to rule, why X kingdom should go to war with the other kingdom. Suddenly gods became political instruments, and to this day this has not changed. As these infant civilizations, city-states, grew into empires, so did the bureaucracy of the empire. Logistics became more and more important. Maintaining control of a larger population spread out over a larger territory was the new name of the game. Lots of gods with lots of preferences with tons of customs associated to each, and tons of often contradictory moral oughts coming from different gods was slowly becoming a bureaucrat's nightmare. Legislation was hard to implement as each individual could find a justification for his or her actions, in at least one story, about one god. This had to stop. I'm sure you see why by now. And rulers from different civilizations attempted exactly this. Egypt was the first, with the introduction of the Aten as the single god, and trying to wipe away all other gods from existence, wiping them off monuments, destroying temples, and also destroying a very powerful priest caste that didn't like this one bit. The experiment failed, but then resurfaced with the Semites and there it succeeded. What was needed was one rule for all, one God for all, one set of commandments for all. So the individual characteristics of the different gods were all blended together into one all-knowing, all-powerful, omnipresent, author of creation, etc. God. This new God did not incorporate all these attributes by chance, but especially because there were no more gods around to embody them. So he had to have them all in one package. None of the useful political instruments could be left out, and what was desired was to simplify things for the bureaucratic apparatus, so the all-purpose God was created. Also, this coincided with the expansion of old empires which had grown out of being one city-state or a collection of city-states, into one centralized empire. The one rule for all motif is present from the advent of civilization as a necessary tool to justify decisions that affect all. Why are we doing this and not that? George said so. Yeah, but Kevin said otherwise. And John says this. This system might work very well for small groups, where all members of the group know each other and it's realistical for them to talk through decisions like this. But when things grow large, when cities contain thousands or tens of thousands of people, when empires number hundreds of thousands, it becomes impractical to discuss things through. And if George says so and Kevin contradicts, there needs to be some sort of authority to make a decision, so God is the easy way out of the conundrum. God says so. God appointed me king, so I speak for God. Now shut up, and do what you're told. Monotheism was just a natural step in centralization of power. It was an administrative decision. One God for all, one voice controlled by few instead of many voices controlled by many. One king, one God, one law. And by the time of the French Revolution this system was pretty much still in place, in the same form it had been set up thousands of years before. Priests blessed kings into ruling by the will of God. This social system was adopted by Europeans in the form of Christianity, by Arabs in the form of Islam, and the original form was only kept by a smaller number of people. And what a coincidence that these three religions are the three dominating religions in the world, all having pretty much the same concept of God, the same God Veritas 48 was defining in his video. After the French Revolution, however, things changed. Suddenly the church was attacked and dispossessed. Democracy was the new system by which decisions are arrived at, and again coincidentally religion began to be phased out. Suddenly religion started to lose ground, to become not so important as before, to lose adepts, to lose power, to simply lose. And today, a blink of an eye in history later, we are here debating the existence of God. Can you imagine the leap from the heresy of saying that the earth is not the center of the universe, heresy that could cost you your life, to actually debating the existence of God? I'm asking this so you can see how drastic in effect, again, a change in society had on the role of religion and on the concept of God. This video is already too long, and for obvious reasons I can't include nearly as much details as I'd like to. But I strongly encourage you to research every claim I've made here. Wikipedia is a good place to start, as you will find data practically for each and every claim I've made here. There are far better and more in-depth sources to research this, but Wiki should be good enough as a start. Again, this is just an outline, a general picture of the argument. To make it 100% thorough it would need to be a 1,000-page thick tome. My purpose here was to show you how the dots connect. How this God we're debating came into being, and why. What were the steps in his so-called evolution? How before societal change, the concept we are debating now didn't even exist, and had almost nothing in common to the one defined by Veritas 48. One last thing that I want to add is that none of this is judgmental. I'm not saying the animist gods are better or worse than the monotheistic God. I'm not saying that one is smarter and the other more stupid. All I'm trying to show is how each god suited the society in which it functioned, in order to prove a point, which is that man made God, not the other way around.